Hey friends, welcome back to the Guitar Max channel, and if you thought the Trump guitars adventure that we're currently going through couldn't get any crazier, well, you were wrong. Now, if you've seen my earlier videos about the Trump guitars, then you probably already know the basics. Basically, the Trump guitars have been launched, and this is the quote-unquote the only official guitar that is endorsed by President Trump. And they went online. They go from $1,500 to like $11,000 if you want an autographed one. And shortly after that, a couple days later, Gibson issued a cease and desist letter because the main electric guitar, according to Gibson, it infringes on their trademarks and so forth. And, you know, just overall, everybody has, as you can imagine, some very extreme opinions about this whole Trump guitars thing. And there's a lot of new stuff that I want to talk about, but before we go on, I just want to say, and I said this in the other videos, guys, I am not talking about Trump as a person. I'm not saying, you know, that he's good or he's bad. I'm not talking about politics here. I'm talking about the guitars in these videos. So you're always welcome to argue amongst yourselves in the comments section, but don't hate me just for delivering the news, because honestly, this whole thing is just fascinating. Okay, so there's three new things going on in this video that I'm going to talk about. The first one is that since these Trump guitars were launched, a bunch of other companies have been trying to get in on the action, and so a whole bunch of weird, unofficial Trump-related guitars have popped up just since all that stuff came out, and some of them are really crazy. We're going to get into that in a second. Second of all, a bunch of people are asking about this other news thing that's going on, where 3,000 fake Gibson guitars were seized recently by customs. And it's got everybody wondering, you know, because it coincided timing-wise with these Trump guitars, and then Gibson is issuing the cease and desist. Wait a minute, are these two things related? We're going to talk about that also. And the third one is that while I've been digging through all this news, I've discovered some really fascinating history between Donald Trump and Gibson guitars from about 10 years ago. And it makes it really surprising that Gibson is kind of taking legal action against him today. So we're going to get into that as well. So we'll start with this, you know, we'll get right into it. I'll show you all this stuff. But guys, of course, real quick, if you enjoy videos like this and you have not already subscribed, please consider subscribing right now. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you guys is take a look at this guitar. You can go on eBay and get this for $360. This is the Donald Trump MAGA Sexy Trump custom wrapped full-size acoustic guitar. Look at that right there. And of course, I want to stress that this is not an officially endorsed Trump guitar, but this is one of the new products, new Trump-related guitar products that has popped up just recently since all this stuff is going on. Now, I showed you some of the other ones before. This is one of the earlier ones. I showed you this one in a previous video. Trump standing on the tank there, and he's got the eagle carrying the full auto shotgun in the background there. There's also an electric guitar version of this, classic Strat body there. All of these guitars are around $350, $400, and this is just, you know, the kind of stuff that is available for sale in the depths of eBay. Now, there's also other stuff. There's the t-shirt for the Trump Revenge Tour 2024 live at the Oval Office in Washington, D.C. About $17 and $5 shipping from Texas will get you that t-shirt. Now, like I mentioned, some of this stuff existed before this whole Trump guitars thing happened. But I think what's really going on is that some of these companies that make these kind of strange novelty items and everything, they've been paying attention to this whole, you know, how much people have been talking about Trump guitars in the news, and they're trying to kind of get in on the action a little bit. And they've also noticed that the Trump guitars on the website, some of them apparently have sold out. And if the ones that are like $1,500 or $10,000 are selling out, then it's like, well, for sure we can sell one that's $350 or $400. And honestly, as we get closer to Trump getting back into office, you know, going into this coming January, I would expect to see even more of this stuff coming up. Okay, now the next thing is the big thing in the news about 3,000 fake Gibson guitars seized at Los Angeles port. These are, of course, what we refer to as Chibson guitars, and we can read about this a little bit here. I'll put a link to this original article down in the video description below. But basically it says here, now this is from Los Angeles, and I'm in Los Angeles. It wasn't me, I didn't order these. It says here, more than 3,000 fake Gibson electric guitars shipped from Asia were seized by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents at the Los Angeles Long Beach Seaport, authorities said. Had the guitars been authentic, they would have been worth $18 million, U.S. Customs and Border Protection said in a statement. The agency said Gibson confirmed the guitars that were intercepted were counterfeit. Now, the reason everybody is talking about this, I mean, that alone is pretty interesting, but the other thing is this coincided almost perfectly with the Trump guitars being announced and all this speculation about where are the Trump guitars made, and then Gibson issuing the cease and desist to Trump guitars. So a lot of people were kind of, spreading these rumors basically that, oh, those were the Trump guitars that got seized. But look, guys, I can tell you right now, and we can confirm this pretty easily, this is unrelated to the Trump guitars. There's plenty of pictures with this stuff, and there's even lots of video and so forth, and these are all very obvious Gibson knockoffs, again, Chibson type stuff. Yeah, 3,000 of them. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. I hate to say this, but who would be dumb enough to try and bring in that many all at one time? It's obviously not legitimate. But none of these were labeled with the 45 that the Trump guitars have or anything like that. So I've seen a lot of people speculating about that in the comments section, but I think at this point we can say a very hard no, that is not what's going on here. But the next thing I want to talk about, the third thing here, is this bizarre connection, the sort of history between Trump and Gibson guitars from about 10 years ago. And bear with me here because this is a little bit complicated, but it's really pretty fascinating, and it makes what's going on now a little bit confusing. Okay, so do you guys remember about 10 years ago when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service raided Gibson, the Gibson plant in Tennessee? Do you guys remember seeing that in the news? And it had to do with the types of woods that they were using and whether or not they had imported the wood legally, and are these protected species? It was all that kind of stuff. And there were actually 2 different times where the Gibson facility was raided by federal agents. They confiscated a whole bunch of wood, all this stuff. And what was strange about it is it ended up kind of amounting to nothing. These charges against Gibson were originally filed, but like a couple years later, it was all kind of dropped. Well, at that time, when all that stuff was going on, there were many people who felt that Gibson specifically had been targeted by these federal agents because it was during the Obama administration. Of course, Obama was a Democrat, and the then CEO of Gibson had made some significant financial contributions to the Republican Party. And so there were a lot of people that felt that Gibson was basically politically targeted because of that connection. And one of the people that came out against that was Donald Trump. Trump was using it as an example of government overreach and targeting someone based off of political beliefs and so forth. And at the time, Trump was using Gibson as an example of this great American company that the country should be supporting, not fighting against, right? And so Trump was actually giving Gibson, the company, a lot of support. And this is like 2012, like around there. So this is quite a bit before Donald Trump was president the first time in 2016. Now, there was never any formal get-together or anything like that I'm aware of between Gibson, the CEO, Henry, I can't pronounce his last name, but he was the CEO at the time of Gibson. There's never any formal meetings or anything between him and Trump or anything like that I'm aware of. But that history, with Donald Trump kind of publicly praising the company, to me that makes what's going on now even more strange, with Gibson issuing the cease and desist for these Trump guitars. Now, on one hand, you can say, well, the CEO who was in charge of Gibson back then, who had made those financial contributions to the Republican Party. That guy is no longer the CEO of Gibson. He stepped down, I believe, in 2018. And so now there's somebody else in there. So maybe that connection isn't quite there anymore. And I can also see Gibson not wanting to be accused of political favoritism by not issuing the cease and desist. Some changes have happened, of course, in the last 10 or so years. But the way that Gibson is acting towards this whole situation does seem a little bit strange. Now, the other thing that a lot of people have mentioned in the comments is, Max, don't you know that Gibson has to try and enforce their intellectual property rights, because if they don't do that, they could lose them. But guys, here's the thing. For all intents and purposes, Gibson already has lost their intellectual property rights. Gibson is famous for issuing these cease and desist letters. Sometimes they try and get court orders. Sometimes they sue people, right? They're kind of infamous for this, right? But Gibson almost always loses. Usually these letters, these cease and desist letters, amount to nothing. And the times where they have gone through with a lawsuit, it usually doesn't go very well for Gibson. And what are they actually concerned about here? I mean, I think they're talking about basically the body shape of the guitar, because with the Trump guitars, the headstock is different. It uses a bolt-on neck, so the overall construction is different. But you can see, okay, yeah, it's a single cut, kind of, it's a Gibson body style. But I don't think anybody really takes it seriously where they think they're actually going to be able to win a lawsuit based off of that. And I think a good example of this, of maybe a better way to do things, is the way that Fender does stuff. Because at this point, Fender has lost the rights to the body shapes of the Strat and the Tele and so forth. In the past they were trying to sue companies that were using those body shapes, and they just kept losing again and again and again, to the point where it was really established where it's like, look, you don't own those shapes anymore. But of course the Fender logo, the Fender name, and the shape of the headstock is still protected. So I can see a situation where if someone is ripping off that stuff, like in the obvious case of like these Chibson guitars we're talking about, by all means issue the cease and desist for that, sue for that, right? Because that's something that is realistically, Gibson might actually win that lawsuit. That is still going to be protected, but the body shape just isn't anymore. So at this point, it just seems like an exercise in futility for Gibson. Okay, so now my question to you guys is, what do you think is going to happen with this whole Gibson cease and desist situation going forward in the future? Myself, I've got a feeling it's not really going to amount to much at all. Certainly, Trump has the resources to fight a legal battle like this, and even under the best of circumstances, I don't think Gibson would be able to win a lawsuit based off of the perceived infringement that they're looking at here. Okay, and what do you guys think about all the other stuff? What do you think about those other Trump-themed guitars that are popping up? Please let me know down in the comment section below. And one other thing, guys, I want you to know I am trying really hard to be able to get my hands on one of these Trump guitars so I can actually do a review of it, look at how it's manufactured, what's the quality like, what's the build construction like. I'm trying to do that. I don't know for sure if I can do it yet, but if I can, you'll see it here. I absolutely promise. Okay, guys, that's it for this video. Again, comments, questions, concern, all that down below. And in the video description, I'm going to put links to everything I was talking about in this video, these news articles, my sources, and so forth, as well as a link to my new YouTube online course. If you want to learn how to do YouTube, that's going to be down in the video description as well. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.